This one's going to be a really important one, so make sure you pay attention. Okay, so everybody understands the principle of quality over quantity. Everybody understands that. It's an ancient principle. Kids understand it. Everybody is aware of it. But I think as human beings, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of the potential of that principle. So it's closely related to these ideas of racing to the top and racing to the bottom. So to quickly explain what those principles are, imagine you wanted to start a bakery. Now you've got two options. You could say that you want to be the best baker in your town. You want your products to be the best. You want people to tell their friends because once they've had your products, they can't believe how good they are, and that's how you want to operate. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is by saying, you know what, I'm going to play safe. And usually what people mean when they say they want to play safe is they want to do what everybody else is doing. And then that means you turn yourself into an interchangeable commodity where your baked goods are just the same as everybody else's, so that they are nothing special. And then what happens is you have nothing to compete on except price. So now you have to make yours the cheapest in order to stay in business. So that way is called the race to the bottom. It always leads to the worst possible outcomes for yourself and your customers. Your customers get the worst possible products at the cheapest price. You get the least amount of money and you have to work hard and you have to work the hardest, and it's just a nightmare for everybody. That is a race to the bottom. The other option is a race to the top where you compete on quality. You compete on quality rather than quantity. So now you can work on making the best products rather than churning out as many products as possible. Your life is easier. You get all of these rave reviews. Everybody loves you. You're happy. Your customers are happy. Everybody is in a wonderful state. That's the race to the top. Now, here's the thing. You may not have realized, but in the last century, Western cultures and developed nations have had this thing called progress, where they keep pointing to the graphs and the statistics and they say, look, you can now get mass-produced products at a fraction of the price. So 100 years ago, if you needed a clock to put on your wall, it would have been really expensive. You would have had to go to a kind of, I don't know, a clocksmith or something, a master craftsman, and then he'd take ages making sure it looks really nice and shiny using all these metallic kind of compounds instead of all the cheap plastic of nowadays. And he would have given you a really nice product, but it would have been really expensive. But now you can get a cheap one that's mass produced in a factory made in China, and isn't that wonderful? Well, having a clock, I guess, is better than not having a clock, but you cannot deny that this is a race to the bottom. Yes, everything is cheaper, but also it's far inferior in terms of quality, and we've lost the kind of handmade touch of what we used to have. And one company that is famous for going against this trend is Apple. So Apple mass produces everything, but somehow manages to make it so that they're competing on quality all the time. So Apple absolutely refuse to compete on price. They will never be the cheapest, but they always insist on being the best. A lot of people have kind of hatred and animosity towards Apple because they themselves have this scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset inevitably leads people to a race to the bottom. People with a scarcity mindset will kind of devalue themselves and sell themselves short. So when they go applying to jobs and, the people say, what do you have to offer? And they'll say, well, obedience. I will do whatever you say. And that is a race to the bottom at the individual level. And we're seeing this everywhere now. On LinkedIn, they have these easy apply buttons where you can just fire off your CV to 1,000 companies in a day. Another race to the bottom. The companies are swamped with CVs and they're all very poor quality. Compare that to companies who refuse to advertise on job sites and they insist that you can only get to them directly. They are going to get far higher quality applicants because, let's use the bakery example again. Let's say you've established your bakery and it's doing really well and now you need some staff. You'd do far better to advertise in your window than going online. Online, you'll get all kinds of random people. You'll get guys from India applying, even though it's an in-person job and not a remote one. So that's what people are realizing now. And much of the internet is a race to the bottom. It's an increase in quantity, but a reduction in quality. Here's something that will blow your mind. The so-called sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s, where they said you don't have to be married anymore, like, you know, we're going to let people have sex with whoever they want. Look what that led to. That led to a massive increase in quantity, but a massive decline in quality. Generally speaking, people are saying that was an unmitigated disaster. This is not natural. This is not what people want. People want to pair bond. Like in human history, there have been other experiments where they said, like in small groups, people established these little communities where they said, we're going to abolish marriage and any man can have sex with any woman and vice versa, and they can do what they want. In all of these experiments, invariably it collapsed and everybody went back to pair bonding again. And I'm seeing that happen on a societal scale now. So that's another example of where people are going for quality rather than quantity. So you'll get these guys who brag about how many women they've slept with. How many, right? Not how good, right? Not how high quality or not how high status, but how many, right? They were just scraping the barrel. Like they were just sleeping with all these girls who would have sex with anybody. And then they're bragging about it as if they've achieved something. And of course you haven't, because that's the definition of a race to the bottom. You haven't achieved anything, right? So none of these things are to be proud of. The opposite to this is, well, in the sexual realm, a race to the top has a name. It's called chastity. Chastity is not prudishness. It's not saying sex is bad. Chastity is saying, you know what, I'm going to have high standards, right? So I want a quality over quantity approach. That's what chastity is. And people who take that mindset invariably end up in healthy marriages. Their kids get a healthy idea of what a healthy relationship between a man and a woman looks like, and then the chain continues, and then they have good standards for themselves. So everything that you were told was progress was really just a race to the bottom. It was really a triumph of quantity over quality, and everything has just turned awful as a result. And the response to that has to be, in everybody's life and at a societal scale, a decision has to be made where we're going to race to the top now. We're going to chase quality instead of quantity. And I think that's how it has to be.